The snare had been delayed multiple times before Ukrainian authorities concluded one ongoing night that conditions were at last right. Shrouded in murkiness, a legion of Kyiv's 129th Unit squeezed ahead, progressing subtly on clueless Russian warriors. When the Russians arranged along the forefront acknowledged they were enduring an onslaught, it was past the point of no return. Ukraine's recovery of the little town of Neskuchne in the eastern Donetsk district on June 10 exemplifies the initial methodology of a significant counteroffensive sent off recently. When they succeed, small platoons make incremental gains in territory and battlefield intelligence by relying on the element of surprise. We had a couple of situations. Eventually, I think we picked the best one. Serhii Zherebylo, the 41-year-old deputy commander of the battalion that retook Neskuchne, said to come quietly, unexpectedly, across the 1,500-kilometer, 930-mile bleeding edge. Ukrainian powers are endeavoring to wear out the foe and reshape battlefronts to make better circumstances for an unequivocal toward the east development. One procedure could be to attempt to divide Russia's powers in two, with the goal that the Crimean landmass, which Moscow illicitly added in 2014, is secluded from the remainder of the domain it controls. An armed rebellion in Russia that posed the most significant threat to President Vladimir Putin's power in more than 2 decades gave Ukraine's troops a boost of morale last week. However, it is unknown how the revolt of mercenaries from the Wagner group, led by Russian warlord Yevgeny Prigozhin, will affect the course of the war. For the beyond 4 days, Ukraine has moved forward activities around the eastern city of Bakhmut, which Wagner powers held on to following quite a while of serious battling and afterward gave over to Russian fighters, who keep on losing some ground on their southern flank. However, the Russian military strength along the front line has not changed since the revolt. It isn't clear where Ukraine will endeavor to unequivocally punch through. However, any achievement will depend on recently shaped Western-prepared detachments that are not yet sent. Ukraine's advance is currently being slowed by Russia's heavily fortified positions and relative air superiority. Military experts claim it is difficult to determine who has the upper hand. Ukraine is adaptable, well-armed with cutting-edge weapons, and savvy on the battlefield, while Russia is well-armed with troops and ammunition. Yet, with the pre-winter sloppy season just 4 months away, a few Ukrainian commandants say they are attempting to beat the clock. Analyst Dylan Lee Lurk of the British security intelligence firm Janes stated, although Ukrainian forces are making small and steady gains, they do not yet have the operational initiative, meaning they are not dictating the tempo and terms of action. According to Lurk, this has led some observers to claim that the counteroffensive is not meeting expectations. However, it was never going to look like Ukraine's raid freedom of the eastern Kharkiv area last year, he said, in light of the fact that Russian powers have had excessively lengthy to plan strongholds. According to Putin, whose claims could not be independently verified, Russian authorities claim that Ukraine has suffered significant losses since the start of the counteroffensive, including 259 tanks and 790 armored vehicles. Crushing fights are being pursued in various battle zones. The geography along the Dnieper River has changed as a result of a catastrophic dam collapse that occurred last month in the southern Kherson region, allowing Ukrainians greater mobility there. Although Ukrainian officials have not confirmed these reports, Russian military bloggers assert that a small group of Ukrainian fighters are gaining ground in the area. Across the farming fields of the southeastern Zaporizhzhia district, Ukrainian soldiers supported by tanks, mounted guns and robots seem, by all accounts, to be chipping endlessly more definitively against Russian positions. If Russian forces were able to regain access to the Sea of Azov from this direction, Ukrainian troops would deal a significant blow, effectively cutting off Moscow's land bridge to Crimea. It's too soon to decide if this is a practical objective. In an underground war room on the front, a Ukrainian extraordinary powers leader with the refer to sign as tracker gazes eagerly at a flying perspective on the rich green war zone. His servicemen have quite recently raged in adversary position. However, the return fire is consistent. His fighters hide and wait for orders while the Russians fire rockets into the air. Tracker guides the robot administrator to shoot. A massive cloud of black smoke appears on the screen. A hit, he says. Ukrainian soldiers are as yet a few kilometers from Russia's super protective lines. As they enter further into an involved area, the warriors should fight with Russian safeguards coordinated in a corner-to-corner design, 10 kilometers somewhere down in certain areas, including minefields, hostile-to-tank trenches, and pyramid-molded deterrents known as winged serpent's teeth. They also become more susceptible to Russian air attacks with each advance. Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar stated this week that since the beginning of the counteroffensive, at least 130 square kilometers, 50 square miles, of land have been regained in the south. According to a U.S. official with knowledge of the Biden administration's thinking, the counteroffensive is a long slog that is putting Ukrainian forces to their limits in a way that hasn't happened in the 16-month war before. The official, who was not permitted to speak publicly and spoke on the condition of anonymity, stated that there was never anticipated to be a D-Day moment, but that the pace of the counteroffensive will be tough and challenging for the Ukrainians in the early going. The official stated that, in contrast to some of the earlier battles in the conflict, in which Russian forces resisted little or even fled the scene, Ukrainian forces are currently up against a lot of resistance. In the Upper East, Russian powers have moved forward hostile tasks toward the Kreminna woodland close to Lyman, determined to tie down a cradle to forestall attacks near Moscow's stock lines, said Lurk. In any case, it might well have an optional point of constraining more Ukrainian organizations, he said. The thick forested region has shown to be famously troublesome territory, according to Pavlo Yusov, a press officer with the National Guard's Thunderstorm Brigade, who is currently in Lyman. The Russians have sabotaged routes going into the woods, and there have been cases where they enter behind the first line of Ukrainian defenses. Colonel, the commander of the 30th Mechanized Brigade, Volodymyr Silenko, who is based near Bakhmut, takes criticism about the speed of the attacks very seriously. He stated that focusing on the adversary's thinking and response is much more crucial. Silenko is aware that the Russians monitor his men in the same way that he monitors theirs. Moscow sees their developments, how they change, how they advance. Trickery was a vital piece of Ukraine's most critical front-line accomplishment to date. The previous fall's Kherson stratagem. Ukrainian forces were able to quickly retake the northern Kharkiv region by making it appear that the city of Kherson was the primary target of that counteroffensive.